Well, look at that. Malcolm Gaines. 10 years and you still dress like you're about to pour concrete somewhere. What are you doing these days? Still chasing that dream? The big company, the big contracts? What was it you always used to say? One day this city's gonna know my name.
I run an infrastructure business.
An infrastructure business. Baby, is that what we're calling it now? He means he owns a truck. Maybe two.
Quentin Rowe Development Group. Don't feel bad, man. Not everybody's built for the big leagues.
Hey, if you're ever looking for steady work, I could use a reliable crew chief on one of my sites. Good hours, decent pay.
My name is Malcolm Gaines. I'm 44 years old, and I run a company most people in this city depend on without knowing my name. That was exactly how I wanted it. Until the night my ex-wife stood in front of our entire graduating class, looked me dead in the eye, and told everyone I was nobody. She laughed. The room laughed. And I let them. Because in about 20 minutes, that screen behind the stage was going to light up. And every single person in that ballroom was going to understand exactly who had been standing in the room with them all night. This is that story. If you're new here, stick around. This is the kind of story I think you'll want to hear to the end. And if it stays with you the way it stayed with me, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it means a lot. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand what kind of man I was 10 years ago. I wasn't nobody, but I wasn't much either. Not on paper. Not by the standards Rochelle Benton had built her entire life around. I was 44 years old when I walked into that reunion. An engineer by training, a builder by instinct. I'd spent the better part of my 30s hauling myself out of a hole that most people never would have climbed out of. But the night Rochelle laughed at me in front of our old classmates, none of that history was visible. All she saw was the gray suit. That was always the problem with Rochelle. She only ever looked at what was in front of her. We met in college, married young, and spent 8 years building what I thought was a life together. What I was actually building, I understand now, was her comfort. I mortgaged my truck, the one I used for contract work, to pay for her MBA program. I took night jobs, weekend jobs, any job that kept her in networking events and professional conferences where she could rub elbows with people she thought could lift her higher. When her family's house needed repairs, I showed up with tools and didn't send a bill. When her brother had debt that was about to cost him his credit, I covered it quietly. I never asked her to announce any of it. I just did it because that's what you do for the people you love. But love, I learned, is not always a two-way ledger. When my first company hit a rough patch, cash flow problems, a contractor who walked off with a deposit, the kind of ordinary catastrophe that kills small businesses every day, Rochelle sat across from me at the kitchen table and said she didn't sign up to go down with a sinking ship. She didn't say it cruelly. That was almost worse. She said it the way someone announces they're switching grocery stores. Practical. Final. I found out about Quentin Rowe 3 weeks before she filed the divorce papers. I didn't confront her. Part of me thought, and this is the part I'm most ashamed of, that if I could just turn things around fast enough, she'd see what she was about to throw away. She didn't stay long enough to find out. After the divorce, I stopped trying to prove anything to Rochelle Benton. I redirected every hour I had been spending on resentment into Gaines urban systems, infrastructure, smart transportation, urban reconstruction, the kind of work that doesn't make headlines until suddenly a city can't function without you. 10 years later, my stake in the company had crossed $1 billion. Not because I chased the number. I didn't even track it closely until my CFO made me sit down and look at it. But because I had spent a decade building something real, and real things compound over time. I kept my profile low by choice. My name appeared in contracts and filings, not in profiles and features. I used trusts to fund education initiatives. I had a team that handled press, so I didn't have to. What I did have And what mattered more than any of it was Simone. Simone Gaines, née Carter, was an education rights attorney who ran a scholarship fund for low-income students out of an office 3 miles from our house. She had known me before the billion. She had made me dinner during the years when I was still working out of a rented warehouse and eating cold sandwiches at a drafting table at midnight. She never once asked me to be more than I was. She only ever asked me to be honest. That kind of woman changes you. Quietly. Permanently. The morning of the reunion, I was standing in our bedroom, pulling on my jacket, when I stopped at the nightstand. Inside the top drawer was a box I hadn't opened in years. An old shoebox beat up at the corners. Inside it, receipts I had kept from the years I covered Rochelle's expenses. Letters I wrote her and never sent. A small notebook where I used to write down things she said to me on the bad nights. The things that made me wonder whether she was right about me. I stood there with the drawer open for longer than I should have. Simone came in from the hallway, saw me standing there, and didn't say anything for a moment. "You taking that with you?" she asked. "No," I said. I pushed the drawer shut, left the box where it was. But I didn't throw it away either, and she noticed that too. She didn't push. That's the thing about Simone. She knows the difference between a wound that needs air and one that needs time. She kissed me on the cheek and told me she'd meet me there after her afternoon hearing. I told her not to rush. I drove to the reunion alone in my gray suit in a car that didn't announce anything about me. That was intentional. Tonight was supposed to be about the students, not about me. That was the plan anyway. The venue was a hotel ballroom on the north side of Atlanta. Soft lighting, round tables, the particular smell of catered food, and old ambition. People who hadn't seen each other in a decade, standing in clusters, doing the quiet arithmetic of who aged well and who didn't. I had barely made it through the entrance when I heard my name. The real kind, not the loud kind. "Malcolm." Ayanna Bell was standing near the registration table, a glass of sparkling water in one hand, and a look on her face that told me this wasn't just a hello. Ayanna and I had gone through school together. Smart, methodical, the kind of person who noticed things other people filed away as background noise. She'd built a career in compliance auditing, which meant she spent her professional life looking for exactly the kind of thing most people hoped she wouldn't find. We shook hands. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I was going to call you this week," she said, keeping her voice low. "I've been going over the Alumni Association financials, standard prep for tonight, and I found some payments that don't line up. Same vendor group, different names, no corresponding work. I'm talking real money, Malcolm, drawn directly from the scholarship reserve." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, opened it just enough for me to see the top page without making it obvious. On the tab of the second document was a company logo. I recognized it immediately. The same logo on a sponsor packet sitting at the registration table near the door. The same logo on the business card of Quentin Rowe, whose company was currently in discussions for a subcontract on the city's downtown reconstruction project. A project that Gaines Urban Systems controlled. I closed the folder and handed it back to her. "Don't show this to anyone else tonight," I said. "Can you keep it secure until I tell you otherwise?" "Already backed up in 3 places," she said. "I just needed you to know before the evening started." I nodded, thanked her, watched her slip back into the crowd. I stood there for a moment with a glass of water I hadn't touched, recalibrating everything I thought tonight was going to be. I found a seat near the back of the ballroom, and that's when Rochelle found me. She crossed the room with the particular confidence of someone who had already decided how this interaction was going to go. Quentin was half a step behind her, the way men who want to be noticed always position themselves in rooms where they want to be noticed. She stopped in front of me and looked me up and down. "Malcolm Gaines," she said, like she was reading off a list of things that hadn't worked out. 10 years, and you still dress like you're heading to a job site. A few people nearby turned to look. That was the point. I said nothing. I took a sip of water. "Are you still doing the construction thing?" she asked. The word thing was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Or did that finally run its course? "I run an infrastructure business," I said. She tilted her head, smiled. "Infrastructure." She said it the way people say words they find charming in their smallness. "So, what, a truck and some equipment? Maybe a crew of 4 or 5 guys?" Quentin stepped forward and extended his hand. I shook it. "Quentin Rowe, Rowe Development Group. We're currently being considered for a major piece of the downtown Atlanta reconstruction, $100 million corridor." He smiled. "You may have seen it in the news." "I may have," I said. He smiled like I had complimented him. Rochelle leaned slightly toward the couple standing to our left, 2 of our former classmates who were listening without pretending not to. "Malcolm was going to be an engineer," she said, with the fond exasperation of someone telling a story that ends with a lesson. "He had all these plans, companies, projects, big ideas." She shrugged. "Life doesn't always cooperate, right?" She was looking at them when she said it, not at me. That was the tell. She wasn't talking to me. She was performing for the room. I didn't give her anything back, not a flinch, not a correction, not a single word that would let her know she was standing in the wrong version of the story. Quentin offered me his business card, said if I was ever looking for work, he could use someone reliable on a maintenance crew at one of his sites. I put the card in my jacket pocket without looking at it. The conversation drifted. Rochelle moved on to other people, other performances. But I noticed Quentin lingering a half-second longer than he should have, his eyes dropping to my wrist before he turned away. He had seen my watch. It was an expensive-looking, plain case, dark face, simple band. But it had been commissioned specifically for the founding team of Gaines Urban Systems on our 10th anniversary. 12 of them existed. Quentin had glimpsed a photograph of it once in a financial trade piece about the company. He wouldn't have been able to place it with certainty, but I could see the hesitation in his face, the small crack of a man who suspects he's missing something important, but can't confirm it yet. He pulled out his phone and tried to search something. The hotel Wi-Fi was unreliable in the ballroom. He got nothing. He said something quietly to Rochelle. She laughed and waved him off. She was still performing. She hadn't noticed the crack. I sat with the information for a few minutes. I had 3 choices. I could leave, walk out, skip the announcement, have my team release a statement in the morning. Clean, quiet, completely consistent with how I had lived the last 10 years. I could announce myself right now, stand up, say my name, say my company, and let the room do the rest. Rochelle would understand within seconds what she had just done. So would Quentin. Or I could stay. Keep my mouth shut, let the evening unfold the way it was always going to unfold, and use the time to watch Quentin more carefully. Because the folder Ayanna showed me wasn't just about money. It was about scholarship funds being skimmed from kids who came from the same neighborhoods I came from. Kids who needed those funds the way I needed them at 17, when a teacher named Mrs. Elaine Dobbs wrote me a check from her own pocket to cover my application fees because she believed I was worth the bet. This wasn't about Rochelle anymore. I put down my water glass, stayed in my seat, kept my face neutral. Rochelle glanced over at me from across the room and smiled the slow, satisfied kind because she thought my silence was confirmation. She thought she had read the room correctly. She thought I had nothing to say because I had nothing to show. She had never been more wrong about anything in her life. About 40 minutes into the evening, Rochelle made her second move. She had been working the room. I watched her do it, cycling through clusters of former classmates with the efficiency of someone running a strategy. A compliment here, a pointed question there, always positioning herself at the center of whatever story was being told. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. Then she came back for me. This time, she brought an audience. She guided me with a hand on my elbow firm enough to steer toward a group of about 6 people standing near the bar. Doctors, a corporate attorney, someone who had done something in finance. The kind of people Rochelle collected the way others collected receipts. "Everyone you remember, Malcolm," she said with a warmth in her voice that hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. "We were married for, what was it, 8 years?" "8 years," I said. "He's in construction," she continued before I could add anything. "Tell them about your company, Malcolm, the infrastructure thing." There it was again. Thing. I looked around the group. They were watching me with the polite attention people give to someone they expect to say something unremarkable. "We build and manage urban systems," I said. "Transportation networks, smart grid infrastructure, public works, reconstruction. Primarily in the Southeast, but we've expanded into 4 other regions over the last 3 years." A brief silence. Rochelle filled it. "He's always been good with technical language," she said, smiling at the group. "Malcolm could make anything sound bigger than it is. It's a gift." The attorney in the group, a man named Darius, who I vaguely remembered from our junior year, looked at me with something that might have been curiosity. But Rochelle was already pivoting, already redirecting the conversation toward Quentin, who had appeared again at her side. "Quentin's company is competing for a major city contract right now," she said. "The Downtown Corridor project. It's going to be transformational for Atlanta." Quentin accepted the handoff smoothly. He talked for 2 minutes about the project scope, timeline, projected economic impact. He was polished, I'll give him that. He had the vocabulary of someone who had spent years pitching to rooms that didn't entirely believe him, which meant he had learned to keep moving and never let the silence settle long enough for doubt to form. At no point did he appear to know that the company ultimately controlling the approval pipeline for the project he was describing was mine. I didn't correct him. I watched his hands while he talked. The way his eyes moved to the door every few minutes, like he was trying to confirm something he hadn't been able to look up on his phone yet. He was still thinking about the watch. Then the door opened, and Simone walked in. She came in the way she always entered rooms she hadn't chosen for herself, quietly, without announcement, scanning until she found what she was looking for. She was still in her work clothes, a dark blazer over a deep burgundy blouse, and she had the focused composure of someone who had just come from 3 hours of legal argument and still managed to be the sharpest person in the building. Darius recognized her first. I saw it happen, the slight double take, the widening of recognition. "Is that Simone Carter?" he said. She represented the Hollis family in that education discrimination case, the one that went federal. She had. The Hollis case had been one of the largest education rights settlements in Georgia's history. Simone never talked about it at home, except to say it had taken 2 years off her life and given her a reason to keep going. She crossed the room, found my eyes, and walked directly to me. She put her hand in mine and said quietly, "Sorry I'm late. The hearing ran long." "You're right on time," I said. She looked at the group, smiled, and introduced herself simply as Simone Gaines. The energy in the circle shifted, not dramatically, but I felt it. Rochelle felt it too. I watched Rochelle's eyes move from Simone's face to her hand in mine to the name she had just said. Gaines, not Carter, not her maiden name. Gaines. I had remarried, and the woman I had married was someone this room recognized and respected before she had said a single word about herself. Rochelle said nothing for a moment, When she did speak, her voice was exactly calibrated, warm, unbothered, perfectly controlled. Simone, it's nice to meet you. I'm Rochelle. Malcolm and I were married years ago. I know who you are, Simone said pleasantly, not unkindly, just plainly. Another silence. Quentin touched Rochelle's elbow. She smiled through it. Leonard Shaw took the stage at 8 o'clock. He was 62 gray at the temples, with the measured authority of a man who had spent decades caring about things other people didn't bother to care about. He had been our principal. Now he ran the Alumni Association and oversaw the school's scholarship program. He tapped the microphone, waited for the room to settle. Before I get to tonight's announcement, he said, I want to say something that isn't in my prepared remarks. The room stilled. I've run this Alumni Association for 15 years, he said. I built the scholarship fund from a few $1,000s into something I was proud of. And I genuinely believed that the financial processes I put in place were sound. He paused. I've recently learned that my confidence in those processes may have been taken advantage of. I don't have all the details yet, but I want you to know that I know, and that it matters to me. He didn't look at Quentin. He didn't look at Rochelle. He just said it and moved on. But the words landed. Quentin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Rochelle's expression stayed composed, but her stillness had changed quality. It was the stillness of someone who had just decided to be very careful. Leonard moved to the main announcement. The screen behind him lit up with an architectural rendering, a 4-story building, glass and steel and warm wood interiors labeled Technology and Opportunity Training Center. Below the image, the text read, Fully funded. Breaking ground in 6 months. Tonight, Leonard said, I'm honored to announce a $30 million gift from a Douglas alumni, a man who grew up in this community, who sat in these classrooms, and who has spent the last decade quietly changing the infrastructure of this city and others like it. He looked toward the back of the room. His arm rose, one hand extended, pointing directly toward where I was standing. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Malcolm Gaines, founder and controlling shareholder of Gaines Urban Systems, and our $30 million donor. The silence hit before the applause did. I heard someone whisper, Wait, him? I heard a glass hit the floor somewhere to my left. I saw Darius standing completely still, staring. I saw the woman who had laughed loudest at Rochelle's joke press her hand slowly over her mouth. And I saw Quentin. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me, face completely stripped of everything. The confidence, the charm, the easy smile. Just a man doing very fast math and not liking any of the answers. I turned to Rochelle last. She hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. Her glass was still raised from the toast she had made 30 seconds ago, suspended halfway between the table and her lips, forgotten. Her eyes were on the screen. Then they moved to me, and for the first time all evening, she had absolutely nothing to say. I stood, walked to the stage, shook Leonard's hand. The applause came then full and genuine, and I let it settle before I spoke. The center belongs to Mrs. Dobbs, I said, and to every student who walks through that door and doesn't know yet what they're capable of. I was one of those students once. The only difference between then and now is that somebody believed in me before I had anything to show for it. I paused. That's what this is for. I stepped down from the stage. I did not look at Rochelle on my way back to my seat. She found me within 10 minutes. The woman who had spent the first half of the evening performing my failure for an audience was now standing in front of me with an entirely different script. Malcolm, Her voice was softer, careful. I owe you an apology. The things I said earlier, I was being awful. You know how I get at these things. Too much wine, too much nostalgia. She laughed lightly. I always believed in you. You know that. I know what you believed, I said. She absorbed that without reacting to it. She was good. Quentin appeared beside her, and this version of Quentin was nothing like the one who had offered me a position on a maintenance crew. This one was collegial, warm even. Listen, he said. I had no idea who I was talking to tonight. No idea. Gaines Urban Systems. I mean, we've been trying to get a meeting with your development office for months. He laughed like this was a pleasant coincidence. I think there's a real opportunity for our companies to work together on the corridor project. I'll have my team follow up, I said, after the audit. The word landed quietly. Quentin's smile didn't disappear, but it stopped reaching his eyes. Audit, he said. Standard process, I said, before any new partnerships. He held my gaze for 1 second too long. Then he nodded, took Rochelle by the arm, and steered her toward the bar. I turned to find Ayanna at my elbow. Someone tried to access the alumni financial records server remotely, she said, about 10 minutes ago. Did they get in? No, but they tried. What happened next moved faster than I had anticipated. By 10 o'clock, a clip had been posted to the Alumni Association's live stream, edited, selectively, cut, beginning at the moment Rochelle had been loudest, and ending with my name on the screen, stripped of all context. Watched without the full evening behind it, it looked like a man who had engineered a public humiliation. By the next morning, Rochelle had given a video interview from her phone, speaking in the low, measured tone of someone who had prepared for this possibility. She said she was shocked. She said she hoped people would consider that public displays of wealth weren't always what they appeared to be. She said Malcolm had never gotten over their divorce. The clip spread fast. Simone was quiet on the drive home. Not the silence of someone who had nothing to say, the silence of someone choosing when to say it. She waited until we were in the kitchen, coats off, the city quiet outside the window. The board is going to call tomorrow, she said. They'll want you to pull back. Freeze the donation, let legal go after Quentin and Rochelle publicly and completely. I know. She set her glass down on the counter and looked at me directly. Malcolm, I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Okay. Are you protecting those kids? She said. Or are you still waiting for Rochelle to understand what she gave up? The question didn't sting the way a lesser version of it might have. It landed quietly, the way true things do. I sat with it, because the honest answer, the one I hadn't said out loud to anyone, not even to myself, was that I didn't fully know. I had told myself this was about the scholarship fund, about Ayanna's documents, about the students who came from neighborhoods like mine and deserved to have someone stand between them and the people who saw their futures as a revenue stream. And it was about those things. It genuinely was. But somewhere beneath all of it, there was still a version of me that had driven to that reunion in a gray suit and a low-profile car, not because I didn't want recognition, but because some part of me had wanted to watch Rochelle encounter who I had become without any warning at all. If I use what I have to destroy her, I said slowly, then everything I've built is still just a response to her. And she's been controlling me for 10 years without even knowing I was there. Simone didn't say anything. She just watched me. The kids come first, I said. Everything else I need to figure out for the right reasons. She nodded once. Outside, Atlanta was dark and quiet. Somewhere across the city, in a server Quentin's people hadn't managed to reach, Ayana's backups were sitting exactly where she had put them. And in a hotel ballroom that was emptying out, Rochelle Benton was telling a story about a man who had never gotten over her. She believed every word of it. That was the last night she would be able to. Gerald Hartwell called at 7:53 the next morning. I was already at the kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, reading through the overnight coverage. 2 outlets framed it as a feel-good reunion story. The third had found Rochelle's video and built something murkier around it. Donor's surprise announcement raises questions about motive, ex-wife says. Hartwell didn't waste time. The City Council has flagged the corridor project pending clarification of your personal relationship to the Alumni Association controversy. The school board is considering freezing the donation, and Roe's attorney sent a letter this morning accusing Gaines Urban Systems of using municipal contract leverage to eliminate a competitor. That's not what happened. I know that. But right now the story is being written by someone else, and you are not in it well. He paused. Pull back. Let legal go after Roe and the woman publicly and completely. You have everything you need to end both of them inside a week. I stood and walked to the window. If I go public with everything I have on Rochelle right now, I said, I burned through documents that contain the financial records of families who applied for those scholarships in confidence. Their income information, their children's academic histories. I'm not using that as ammunition. Then, redact Hartwell. I said his name the way you say it when you want someone to stop talking. Call a press briefing for this afternoon. I'll be there. Silence on the line. What are you going to do? He asked. The right thing, I said. Which is slower than what you're suggesting. But it's what I'm doing. I called Ayana before 9. How complete is what you have? I asked. Complete enough, she said. Multiple shell companies, all traceable to Roe Development Group subsidiaries. Nearly 24 invoices submitted to the Alumni Scholarship Fund over almost 2 years, all for services that were never performed. And the contracts weren't approved by a ghost. They were signed off by a member of the Alumni Finance Committee. Rochelle, she confirmed. She wasn't a bystander, Malcolm. And there's more. Roe's company had already been pre-positioned as the preferred vendor for the new technology center before the donor was even announced. Someone submitted a recommendation 6 weeks ago. Same signature. They were going to use the center to run the same scheme at a larger scale? The $30 million donation would have been the most lucrative pass-through they'd ever had access to, she said. They just didn't know the donor was going to be sitting in the room. I thanked her, told her to hold everything and release nothing without my say. Then I called my attorney and told her what I was about to do. The press briefing was held in the lobby of the Gaines Urban Systems Regional Office on Peachtree Street. 15 journalists, a handful of cameras, Hartwell standing to the side with his arms crossed. I stood at the podium without notes. I want to address what's been circulating since last night directly, I said. There have been suggestions that my involvement with the Douglas Alumni Scholarship Fund was motivated by personal animus toward my former spouse, and that last night's announcement was staged to cause her embarrassment. I let that sit for a second. I'm requesting an independent forensic audit of the Alumni Association's financial records going back 3 years. I'm temporarily recusing myself from the City Corridor Project's approval process until that audit is complete. And I'm opening Gaines Urban Systems' internal records on the scholarship donation to any investigative body that requests them. A journalist near the front raised her hand. I held up mine, not yet. The $30 million scholarship fund will not be frozen, I continued. The students who have been identified as recipients will not lose their awards regardless of what the audit finds, because I will fund them personally if the institutional channel is compromised. Those kids did nothing wrong. They will not pay for what adults around them did. I paused. Rochelle Benton is my former wife. What is happening with the Alumni Fund is not a personal matter. It is a financial crime against students from low-income families who are told that money existed to help them. I will not call it anything less than that in exchange for a quieter news cycle. The audit took 12 days. On the fourth day, Quentin's attorney released a statement saying any irregularities in the Alumni Fund were the result of a finance committee member approving invoices without proper vetting. He didn't name Rochelle. He didn't need to. On the sixth day, Rochelle released her own statement, saying she had signed documents in good faith based on representations made to her by the fund's primary vendor. She didn't name Quentin. She didn't need to either. They were dismantling each other in public, which meant neither of them had anything left to negotiate with. On the ninth day, I got a text from a number I hadn't saved but recognized immediately. Malcolm. I need you to tell them this was a misunderstanding. You know me. You know I wouldn't intentionally hurt those kids. We have history. You owe me the chance to fix this quietly. I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. The audit findings were released on the morning of the 12th day. 3 shell companies, all traceable to Rowe Development Group subsidiaries. 19 invoices totaling just over $340,000 drawn from the Scholarship Reserve Fund over 22 months. Services never performed. A pre-positioned vendor recommendation for the Technology Center construction contract submitted before the donor announcement, signed by a member of the Alumni Finance Committee. Gaines Urban Systems was cleared entirely. No connection to the missing funds, no conflict of interest in the scholarship donation. Quentin Rowe's company was removed from consideration for all city projects and referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. His contractor's license was suspended pending the outcome. Rochelle was removed from the Alumni Association board. Her position at a real estate consulting firm, one Quentin had arranged for her, was terminated within 48 hours. She faced civil liability for the invoices bearing her signature and was named a person of interest in the broader criminal investigation. Leonard Shaw issued a statement detailing every procedural gap that had allowed the fraud to occur, named the specific oversight failures he was responsible for, and announced a complete restructuring of the fund's governance. He didn't deflect. He didn't minimize. He just told the truth about what had happened on his watch and what he was going to do about it. I respected that more than I can easily articulate. The Technology Center broke ground on a Tuesday morning in early November. I stood in the back of the small ceremony in the same gray suit. The students who had been selected as the first scholarship recipients were in the front row, 17 of them from the same neighborhoods I had grown up in, all carrying the particular composure of young people who have learned not to count on things until they actually happen. When Leonard introduced me, I kept it short. I told them the center was named after a woman who had believed in students before they had given her any reason to. I told them that was the only kind of belief that mattered, the kind that came before the evidence. I told them I hoped they'd prove her right. Afterward, I shook hands, spoke to a few parents, and left before the cameras finished packing up. That evening, Simone and I ate at home. Something simple. The television was off. The city outside was doing what cities do in the early evening, winding down from one version of itself and winding up toward another. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it honestly before I answered. "Like it's over," I said. "Like I'm not sure when I stopped waiting for it to be over. But it is." She nodded slowly. "The people watching tonight," she said. "The ones who know your name, now they know what you have. That's what they'll remember." "I know," I said, "and that's okay, because I know what I built it for." She smiled, just barely. The way she smiles when I say something she already knew I was going to say. After dinner, I went to the bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer. The box was still there, beat up at the corners, patient in the way that objects are patient. I took it out and set it on the bed and opened it. The receipts were yellowed at the edges. The letters I had never sent were rubber banded together. The handwriting recognizable as mine from a decade ago, tighter, more pressured. The handwriting of someone working very hard at something he wasn't sure was working. The notebook was at the bottom, small and spiral-bound. Its cover creased from being opened and closed too many times in too small a space. I didn't read any of it. I didn't need to. I remembered all of it. I set aside the few documents that had legal relevance and put them in an envelope to be filed. Everything else, the letters, the notebook, the rest of the receipts, I put back in the box and carried it to the kitchen. I stood there for a moment. Then I let go. Simone was in the living room watching the live stream from the Technology Center reception on a local news channel. Students talking to cameras. Leonard shaking hands. The building lit up from the outside in the November dark. I sat down next to her. A student was speaking now. A girl in a green jacket, maybe 16 years old. She was being interviewed by a local reporter. She was talking about computer engineering, about wanting to build things that lasted. She texted me, I said. Rochelle, a few days ago. Wanted me to call it a misunderstanding. Simone looked at me. I didn't answer, I said. She looked back at the screen. She thinks you never got over her. I know, I said. For a long time, she wasn't entirely wrong. And now? I watched the girl on the screen talk about the future like it was something she had a right to. Like it was something she had already decided to walk into. Now I'm sitting in my house, I said, watching something I built do what I built it to do. I looked at Simone. And you're the only person in the world I want to be sitting next to. She leaned against my shoulder and didn't say anything else. On the screen, the girl in the green jacket laughed at something the reporter said, and for a moment, she looked exactly like what she was, a 17-year-old who didn't yet know how large her own life was going to be. I had been that person once, in a classroom with a teacher who wrote a check she didn't have to write, believing in something that hadn't proved itself yet. The center wasn't named after me. It was named after her. That was exactly right. 10 years ago, I thought the greatest victory I could ever have would be the moment Rochelle Benton understood what she had walked away from. I don't think that anymore. The greatest victory was sitting in a kitchen in Atlanta in a life I had built from nothing, next to a woman who had never once needed me to prove my worth to her, and realizing that the only person whose opinion of me had ever really mattered was the one I had spent years ignoring. My own. Rochelle never had to stand in a courtroom and answer for what she had done to me personally. There was no settlement for 8 years of labor and love treated like a liability. But she had to live with what she had chosen and with what she had lost. Not because I was a billionaire, but because she had spent a decade defining herself by her decision to leave me, and that decision had turned out to be the worst one she ever made. I didn't need her to tell me that. I already knew it, and I had finally, completely without remainder, stopped needing her to say it out loud. If this story stayed with you, the idea that real power is quiet, that the right response to being underestimated isn't rage, but patience, that what you build while nobody